Why even use 9mm when 357 SIG exists? So I'm going to do a test today with our Winchester USA jacketed hollow point ammunition in 9mm and 357 SIG. Now, a lot of people legitimately think that I am biased against the 9mm. I find that kind of funny that people make a lot of comments and get really hurt over it, not realizing that like I own several 9mm pistols. I use them personally for different self-defense applications, and I think it's a decent cartridge overall. But what I do find funny is when people say, you know, it's more powerful than 357 Magnum. It's just as powerful as 357 SIG or all kinds of different stuff, or it's more effective than 45 Auto. And believe me, I'm not making that up when I've heard all those comments, and I find it really funny. But that doesn't mean the 9mm is a terrible cartridge. It just means that the 357 SIG exists, and it's quite a bit better of a cartridge. It's been shown to be more effective overall. So I'm going to use our Winchester USA ammo. Our 9mm happens to be a 115 grain jacketed hollow point rated at 1225 feet per second. Our 357 SIG is a 125 grain jacketed hollow point that is rated at 1350 feet per second. So I'm going to use my 5-inch M&P pistols today to get the best potential out of these cartridges. My M&P 9 and my M&P 40 with the 357 SIG KKM conversion barrel in there. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. You know, no fabric in the way that can potentially clog a hollow point, no rip simulation that can slow down its penetration. We'll see what the best potential is out of those cartridges. Then I'm going to move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inches, and 8 inches in a real living target. So we'll see how these do in our plain clear ballistics shot, and then our real world simulation shots, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm 115 grain jacketed hollow point. This is rated at 1225 feet per second. I believe that's through a 4-inch barrel. I think both of these velocity ratings are through 4-inch barrels, so we should see an increase above 1225. Let's see how close I get to 1225 feet per second through my 5-inch M&P here. $11.92. 11.29, 11.40, 11.79, 11.15. So not so good velocity, and that's how that ammo came. I did not mess with that at all. So 357 SIG. This is a heavier bullet, 125 grain instead of 115 grain. Let's see if we get any more velocity than that 9mm. 14.26, 14.16, 14.17, 14.25, 14.13. So I'd say just a little bit more powerful than 9mm. And to be perfectly honest, the recoil is super low in this. Now, obviously, it's more than the 9mm recoil. The 9mm feels like nothing. This feels like just a little bit of recoil. But it's still very, very low. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up, we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. No denim in the way that could potentially clog these hollow points. No rib simulation that can slow down its penetration. So plain clear ballistics. Let's see how our 9mm does. All right. Let's hit that with our 357 SIG. Let's go take a look. All right, so a big energy dump difference there. The amount of damage that hits right away is significantly different. And that is one thing that makes the 357 SIG so effective. It wants to expand out and fragment right away, just the way 357 Magnum 125 grain bullets would. So it's putting a ton of energy in there. Now, these are, at least the 357 SIGs, under penetrating, but that's kind of the name of the game, that rounds like this do that. So they're not particularly good when it comes to going through barriers when they're these type of old school bullets. But if there's no barrier there, a round like this will dump a huge amount of energy and stop a threat very, very quickly. So yeah, obviously there's a big difference there in the amount of damage going on. Our 9mm, we hit, what the FBI and other agencies would say is adequate penetration, 12 1/4 inches, barely. The track here from our 357 SIG goes to about 11 1/2 inches. So a little bit of a difference there on penetration, because that 357 SIG just expanded so large that it was hard to penetrate very far. Now, this will change when we put that fabric on there. That definitely will change, and we'll see more of a realistic difference between these two. So let's do that. Let's put our fabric and our rib simulations in there, and we'll see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, now we'll do our real world simulation. 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Let's see what we get with our 9mm. All right. Now let's hit that with our 357 SIG. Let's go take a look. All right, so since this fiberboard wants to come out, we'll take a look. And both these did pretty good for energy dump, to be honest. The 357 SIG's just maybe a tad larger, but both did pretty good energy dump going on there. And both of them actually put good energy dump in this first 3-inch piece after going through that fabric. So what that's saying is that the 9mm, as far as doing the things I like to see it do, it's doing it, at least through a 5-inch barrel. So it is in no way, shape, or form a bad cartridge. It's just that the 357 SIG does more of it. So if you got more of something, it's going to be a little more effective. That's just all there is to it. And obviously these wound tracks, the 357 SIG is significantly larger than the 9mm. So in our real world simulation though, the extra power of the 357 SIG does make it penetrate more adequately. So our 9mm still penetrated enough. We got about 13 inches of penetration. And our 357 SIG got about 15 1/4 inches of penetration. So not bad for either of these, at least out of 5-inch barrels. But we saw this whole thing move quite a bit more when that 357 SIG hit. So it is definitely a little bit more effective, to be honest. And I'm not hating on the 9mm, I'm just being realistic here, and that's where people often take it the wrong way. I'm just trying to be realistic and tell the truth about what I see. And if I see something that looks mediocre, like the performance 9mm, I'm going to say it. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it or it's bad. I just think that there's better choices for the average person. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them, these bullets, and then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's our 9mm, and here is our 357 SIG. So 9mm actually expanded pretty good for what it is. Doesn't look too bad overall. Our 357 SIG, even though it's a heavier bullet, it's flatter because of that massive amount of expansion. So that just energy dumped huge. So that would put a lot of hurting on something with that big a diameter. Now going through our real world simulation, things change up a little bit, but we still got pretty much a kind of the same thing going on. It's just not as significant of a difference. So here's our 9mm. Good expansion. Good performing overall. And here is our 357 SIG. So we'll compare these again. 357 SIG isn't dramatically as larger than the 9mm as it was in plain gel, but still a little bit larger, and it still hit a lot harder. So honestly, good performance for both of these cheap rounds of ammo. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just going to get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I could hit the target. And that just kind of tells me, you know, what's the practical shootability like with these? How easy is it to land follow-up shots? So 14 yards from the target, 9mm. Let's see how this does. Very easy to land shots on target, very easy. 357 SIG. We'll see if there's much of a difference here. Yeah, a little bit there. You saw me struggle a little bit, and that's just popping them off as fast as I think I hit the target. Obviously, as I slowed that down a little bit, I would do a lot better than just popping them off. But yeah, the recoil, you know, if you're not training all the time, can be something you have to deal with. But if you're compared to like 357 mag, it's like half the recoil of that. So it wouldn't take that long to get really good with this. So let me back it up for fun and see how these will shoot from some more distance. All right, 75 yards just for fun at this point. So now I'm actually going to aim a little bit slower, see if there's a big difference for, you know, the accuracy at some distance, just for fun. So 9mm. Let's see how this does from 75 yards. All right, it's not too bad overall. First couple of shots I noticed I was really far left and then really far right. 357 SIG. Let's see how this compares. I missed more shots. That could just be me flinching a little bit, but honestly there's not enough recoil that I would flinch, so it's just me randomly not being as good with this particular gun because it's the second one I shot, I think. Get a little bit tired doing this. So the main thing I noticed there was that, you know, the steel was a lot louder when this hit it. So looking at this, obviously our 357 SIG does a lot better for the terminal ballistics, but the 9mm is a little bit more shootable, and that is a fine trade-off. That absolutely is. I'm only here to point out the obvious, that you can't like give something up and then still have something. Like you can't, you know, give up case capacity, give up, you know, powder capacity and actual power, and then have it do as well as something that's more powerful. And a lot of people are kind of delusional about that and think that, you know, the 9mm can do everything else. And I'm here to say, you know, it's a fine cartridge, but if I had to pick a cartridge like to stop a threat with that was trying to harm me, I definitely wouldn't want 9mm unless it was a certain setup. Like I personally do use this 5-inch pistol, but I use 9mm plus P+, ammo in it, and I do that for a specific purpose, for home defense, so that it breaks up in walls a little bit better, and that has a really good proven track record. But if I was going to use like a shorter carry pistol, a 9mm, well, I'd probably prefer carrying something that was more powerful, like 357 SIG or something like that, because it is going to be more effective. And there's just no way around that. It's going to be more effective. So, yeah, the 9mm is fine. But the original question I said was, why would anybody use 9mm? And I'm kind of joking with that, to be honest. But it is still true that the 9mm isn't that great. It's okay. It's a good compromise. But if I had to stop a threat that was trying to harm me, I personally would rather pick 357 SIG any day of the week, just because the terminal effects are just significantly greater. The statistics that are out there about it have it stopping threats significantly faster, with less shots and all of that. So take it for what you will. It's just my opinion. But I think the 357 SIG did quite well here. 9mm did okay too. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like. And thanks for watching.